How do you react when the person you raised like your whole world treats you like a stepping stone in your own company? How do you stay calm when a janitor tells you to watch your own office camera at 7 p.m. if you want to know the truth about your son? What I saw on that screen almost made me pass out, but it also showed me exactly which system I had to use to set things right. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Raymond Cole, and people think they know who I am when they hear that name. They think of the sign over our warehouse yard, the logo on the trucks, the neat little story about a man who started a logistics company from nothing and became Mr. Cole Logistics. They picture someone strong, loud, sure of himself. The truth in recent years is much quieter. I am the older man who moves a little slower, who smiles too much in meetings, who people say has earned his rest. That morning started in my kitchen, like many others. The house was silent. I was alone with a cup of coffee and the faint hum of the fridge. I set my tablet on the table and opened my email. There was a new calendar invite near the top of the screen. The title said, Strategy Session, Growth Roadmap. The time was mid-morning. The location was the main conference room at the office. My name was not on the guest list. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, waiting for my eyes to fix what they saw. Sometimes I convinced myself that I just missed a detail. I tapped the invite again. There it was in plain letters. Invited attendees were Logan, our CFO Irene, 2 younger managers, and an outside consultant whose name I did not know. At the bottom, there was a short line that said, Optional, Founder. There was no name next to that line, not even mine. I sat back and let the coffee grow colder. Logan is my son. He is smart, and I am proud of the skills he brought into the company. I hired him, trained him, gave him a department and a title. When he first started, he used to send me messages late at night, asking for advice. Now I watch his name in my email and wait to see if I am included or not. I called him that morning. It rang twice, then he answered. His voice sounded rushed, like he was already halfway through his day. I told him I had just seen the invite and that I noticed I was not listed as part of the meeting. He told me it was no big deal, just a small working session about digital tools and new route models. He said he did not want to bother me with technical noise. He added that I had been sounding tired lately, and he thought some space would be good for me. I told him I was fine, and that I'd like to stay in touch with high-level planning. He answered that he understood, but that investors like to see younger faces on those calls. He said it in a light tone, almost playful, but the words stayed in my head after the call ended. I finished my coffee in silence and went to get ready for work. The drive to the office was familiar. I had driven that route for more than 20 years, from our first rented warehouse to the building I later bought and filled with our trucks and staff. The parking lot was busy when I arrived. Our yard crew was already moving pallets. A few drivers nodded to me as I walked toward the glass doors, but most hurried past, heads down, headphones in. Inside, the lobby screen showed a rotating slide deck. One screen had our mission statement. Another had a stock photo of a smiling delivery driver and the line, Cole Logistics, Moving the Future. At the bottom of that screen, in smaller letters, it said, Operations led by Logan Cole. My own title did not appear anywhere on those screens. I rode the elevator up to our floor, listening to the soft music and watching the floor numbers climb. When the doors opened, I walked onto the operations floor. Rows of desks, big monitors with route maps, young staff tapping fast on keyboards. The air buzzed with calls and notifications. A few of the team members looked up and greeted me with quick smiles. One of them called me Mr. Cole, in a careful, polite tone. Then he turned his chair back toward the cluster at the far end of the floor. That was where Logan stood, holding a tablet, talking fast, his hands moving as he explained some new process. People stood in a circle around him with notebooks and laptops. I walked over, slow and steady. As I got closer, I heard Logan say that they were going to trim the approval layers and make decisions without waiting for legacy sign-offs. He did not look at me as I approached. When someone finally noticed me and shifted, Logan glanced up, gave a quick nod, and said they were just finishing up. No one said there was a place for me in that circle. I stood at the edge for a few moments, listening. He talked about new dashboards, new reports, how fast decisions win markets. He used phrases like the younger part of our leadership and fresh energy. I was not sure if he could feel my eyes on him or if he chose to ignore me. When they broke, the group scattered to their desks. A few murmured greetings as they passed me. I gave small nods and smiles. I walked to my office, trying not to let the weight in my chest show on my face. My office sits at the corner of the floor, with glass on 2 sides. When we first moved into this building, I felt proud each time I opened that door. It smelled like new carpet and fresh paint. The desk was simple but solid. I picked everything myself. Over the years, I added photos, plaques, small gifts from clients. The room told my story. That morning, as I stepped in, something looked off. A stack of papers sat in the center of my desk that I did not remember leaving there. The top page had our logo in the corner and a big title in bold letters, Leadership Profile, Founding Advisor. I read the title twice, Founding Advisor. Under it, there was a draft paragraph about Raymond Cole, our respected founder, who now serves in a guiding advisory role while a new generation leads daily operations. It went on, in smooth, polite language, about how I had stepped back to focus on long-term vision, and how day-to-day leadership now rested on Logan's shoulders. My job title in our system was still Chief Executive Officer. No one had asked me to change it. No one had asked me about this new description. I picked up the stack and shuffled through it. There were slides for a presentation with headings like Next Generation Leadership and Transition Story. Some slides had pictures of Logan speaking at a conference, shaking hands with a supplier, standing in front of our trucks. On one slide, my own picture appeared in the corner, smaller, faded behind text about legacy. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. Logan leaned in the doorway with a coffee in his hand. He asked how I was doing and said he hoped the documents did not confuse me. He explained that Irene had asked the marketing team to draft some possible stories for outside communications and that they were only testing language. He said that investors liked phrases like advisor and a transition. I asked him why no one told me about this draft. I said I did not like finding a new title for myself on my own desk without warning. He said he understood, but that this was how things move now, fast, in parallel. He told me I was reading too much into a simple draft. He called it just words on paper. Then he mentioned that some investors were nervous about having someone my age as the public face of a growth company and that it might make them feel better to hear about a smooth transition. He smiled and said I should see it as a sign of respect because they wanted to present me as wise and above the daily stress. I nodded because that is what I do when I feel a wall in front of me. I told him that I trusted him to run operations, but that I wanted to be part of any real change in my role. He said he appreciated that, and that we would talk more after the strategy session. Then he left, walking back to his cluster of desks with an easy, quick step. For a while, I just stood there, holding that stack of paper. I set it down again, opened my laptop, and tried to focus on my normal tasks. There were contracts to review, shipment delays to resolve, a message from a long-term client who wanted a call. I answered questions, signed a few forms, and answered the client with my usual calm tone. I could do the work. That part was still natural. At noon, I went to the break room. The break room has a long table, a fridge, a coffee machine that always needs cleaning, and a big screen on the wall that plays news or company updates. A few staff members were already there with their lunches. Irene and Logan stood near the counter, talking in low voices at first. When I walked in, they noticed me, said quick greetings, and then went back to their conversation. I took my food from the fridge, sat at the far end of the table, and listened without meaning to. Their voices carried just enough. I heard Irene say that some companies never move forward because the founder cannot let go. She said that if we did not show new leadership soon, we would lose a chance with a big investor. She added that at some point, someone had to be brave enough to say that the old way was slowing us down. Logan laughed softly and said that he knew that, but that it was complicated when the founder is your father. He said that investors had already asked him privately when he would take full control. He joked that sometimes he felt like he was driving with one foot on the brake, waiting for me to understand a simple email thread. A few people around them smiled and looked down at their food. I sat there with my plate, hands still, my appetite gone. There was no shouting, no harsh insults, nothing anyone could point at as clear cruelty. It was small words, said in a normal tone, in front of people who worked for us. Those words sat heavier than any loud argument. One of the younger managers glanced at me, then away again, as if he was afraid I had heard. I did hear. I heard every part. I also heard the silence that followed. No one stepped in to say that I still deserved respect. No one reminded them that I had built the company they were talking about. The break room buzzed with quiet sounds, forks on plates, the hum of the vending machine, the soft murmur of the television. The sound of my own name was absent. When lunch ended, people left in small groups. Logan told Irene that they needed to finish preparing for the strategy session and that they should head to the conference room. He did not look at me when he said it. They walked out together, laughing about something small. I stayed sitting for a few more minutes, finishing my drink in slow sips. Then I stood, carried my plate to the sink, and washed it myself. My hands moved on their own. My mind was somewhere else completely. I was thinking about the empty line on the calendar invite, the advisor title on my desk, the careful jokes in the break room. On the way back to my office, I walked through the operations floor again. The room felt different, even though nothing had changed in the furniture or the lights. People were busy. Screens glowed. My steps sounded too loud on the floor. I passed by a cluster of desks where a group of younger staff were looking at a dashboard Logan had made. One of them said that it was nice to finally have someone brave enough to push for change. Another said that it felt like a new era. I did not stop. I went back to my office, closed the door, and let the quiet wrap around me. I looked at the photos on the shelf, at the plaque for our first big contract, at the old picture of me holding Logan when he was a baby, standing in front of our first delivery van. I had kept that photo there for years as a reminder of why I worked so hard. For the first time, I looked at it and felt something else besides pride. I felt a slow, heavy question forming inside me. I wondered when exactly I had gone from being the center of this story to being a background figure in my own life. I did not sleep well that night after the break room scene. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking clock on the wall. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Logan at the counter, talking like I was some old piece of furniture that he could not move yet, but would move soon. When I could not stand it anymore, I got up and went to my small home office corner off the living room. There, on a shelf, I keep a simple box of old photos. I took it down, placed it on the desk, and opened it. The first picture on top was the same one from my office shelf, me holding Logan when he was about a year old. His hair was messy, and he was clinging to my shirt. Behind us was our first delivery van, white paint already scratched and tired. Someone had taken that picture in the parking lot of a rented warehouse we could barely afford at the time. Back then, the office was a tiny room with cheap desks and one old computer that made a loud buzzing sound. I used to arrive before sunrise. The air was cold, and the smell of dust and cardboard hung everywhere. We stacked boxes by hand. I made calls to potential clients from a second-hand phone with a crack in the case. When Logan was small and I had no one to help, I brought him with me. I spread a blanket in the corner of that tiny office and let him sleep there while I worked. When he woke up, I gave him crackers or a sandwich and some paper to draw on. There were days when I held the phone between shoulder and ear, signed a contract with a shaking hand, and kept one eye on him so he would not crawl toward the sliding warehouse door. People now see the trucks and the building and think that it was always like this. They do not see the years when every late invoice felt like a storm cloud, when one broken truck could have ended everything. They do not see the nights when I slept in a folding chair next to a fax machine, waiting for a signed agreement to come through. I turned another photo over. This one was our old small apartment, the one we moved into after Logan's mother left. The walls were thin. You could hear the neighbors talking in the hallway. The kitchen was so narrow that if you opened the fridge and the oven at the same time, they touched. Logan had a small bedroom with a simple bed and a shelf full of used books. I slept on a mattress that lay almost directly on the floor. There was a job offer from a larger company at that time. They wanted me on their management team. The pay would have been good, the hours a bit calmer. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with that letter, reading it over and over, while Logan sat on the floor playing with a toy truck. I could have taken it and never started Cole Logistics. But I looked at him, at that small plastic truck rolling across the carpet, and I imagined something different. I wanted a life where I controlled my time, where I could show up at his school events, where I could build something that had our name on it. So I turned down that offer. I threw myself into my own little company instead. To make it work, I worked weekends and evenings. I took on every route, every small client who would trust me. I missed sleep, but I tried not to miss Logan's important moments. I remember standing in school gyms with a phone pressed to my ear, closing a deal while watching him shoot a basketball. I remember answering emails from my car in the parking lot after his parent-teacher meetings. When he wanted to join a school trip abroad, I took on 2 extra contracts and did the paperwork late into the night to make sure we could pay for it. When Logan finished high school, he talked about studying business. I said I would support him. I told him that with his education and my experience, we could build something strong together. I paid his tuition from the company's early profit. I cut my own salary more than once to cover his fees. I drove an old car longer than I should have so he could have books and housing near campus. He came back from university with new ideas and a light in his eyes. He talked about data, automation, software tools that could save us time and money. I felt proud when I watched him explain a concept. He moved fast, and he spoke with the kind of confidence I never had at his age. I remember thinking that this was the future of our company, right in front of me. When he first joined Cole Logistics, people in the office were excited. They called us the 2 Coles. We walked the warehouse together. He showed me new systems. At first, he always asked what I thought. He would come into my office, sit in the chair by the window, and explain an idea. I would listen, ask questions, sometimes say yes, sometimes say we needed to wait. He respected my answers, or at least he seemed to. Over time, something changed, and I am still not sure exactly when. It was not one big event. It was small shifts that slowly built up like dust on a shelf. One day in a client meeting, I started to explain how we could handle a complicated root problem. Logan cut in before I finished, raised his hand slightly in my direction, and said to the room that I was thinking in old patterns. He smiled as he said it, as if it were a friendly joke, but I saw the client hide a small smile behind his hand. Logan then pulled up a colorful chart and talked fast about dynamic routing and real-time data. The client was impressed. I sat there, feeling like a guest at my own table. After that, he started betting on speed over care. He would send proposals without letting me see them first. When I asked why, he said that clients expected quick answers now, not slow approvals. He said he knew my standards and would not do anything I would not support. Sometimes that was true, sometimes it was not. There were also small comments. At first, they were private. In my office, he would sigh and say that I was too careful, that I worried too much, that young companies passed us because they dared to try things. He would laugh and tell me that I needed to trust the new tools. Then those comments left my office walls and went into corridors and meeting rooms. He started calling my careful review legacy checks. He began to talk in front of staff about layered approvals and slow thinking. When I asked him to stay respectful, he said that he was only being honest and that adults in the room could handle open talk. The first time I heard that he had made a big decision without telling me at all was from a client. Arthur Blake, who runs Blake Hardware Group, called to confirm a new rate structure. He thanked me for being flexible. I had no idea what he was talking about. When I asked Logan later, he said he had just taken initiative and that it was no big deal. He reminded me that Arthur liked him and that it saved us both time if he did not run every detail through me. Slowly, staff began to see Logan as the main point of contact for anything important. Younger managers went to his office first. Some even called him boss in casual talk. When I walked onto the floor, they were still polite, but there was a kind of distance in their eyes. Respect, yes, but also pity, like they were looking at someone who had already handed over the keys, even though I had not. Even outside the office, I felt the shift. Sometimes, when I wanted to clear my head, I went to a small cafe across the street. It has big windows that look directly at our building. I used to go there once a week, order a coffee, and plan my day while looking at the trucks going in and out. In more recent months, I started going there just to watch what happened when I was not right inside the office. From the cafe window, I watched employees arrive in the morning. I saw who smiled when they walked in, who looked tired, who rushed up the steps. I saw Logan come in with his phone already at his ear, talking fast, sometimes not even noticing the people who stepped aside to let him pass. I saw him leave late at night with Irene, papers in hand, laughing about something I could not hear. There were evenings when I knew I was the last to leave my own office, and yet I saw lights in conference rooms across the street later. One night, I sat in the cafe with a cup of tea because I could not sleep. Through the glass, I saw Logan and Irene in a small meeting room with a third person I did not recognize. They looked like they were planning something serious. I was not invited to that meeting. The next day, nothing was said to me about it. Piece by piece, the pattern became clear. I was no longer in the loop on important talks. I was asked to attend ceremonial events, to shake hands, to take pictures, to tell old stories at client dinners. For the real decisions, they went somewhere else. Still, I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself that this was simply growth and that I should be glad my son could handle things. I repeated that thought many times, like a small prayer, especially when I felt the sting of a new slight. The day after the break room talk, I tried to focus on regular work. I handled a delay in a shipment, called a client to smooth things over, and checked our weekly numbers. I walked down to the warehouse and spent some time with the drivers. They still greeted me with easy smiles. Their world is more simple. Either the roots work or they do not. When I came back to my office and sat down at my desk, my tablet buzzed with a new notification. I picked it up and saw a fresh calendar invite at the top of the screen. The title said, Leadership Future, Board Discussion, and Alignment. The location was the main boardroom. The invitees included the board members, Irene, and Logan. Next to my own name, in small gray letters, it said, Optional. I stared at the word optional on the screen for a long time. The letters were very small, gray, almost easy to miss. It is strange how sometimes the smallest thing in an email can feel louder than anything said to your face. This was a board discussion about the future of leadership. I was the founder, the current chief, and my presence was listed as something that may or may not happen. I read the invite again from top to bottom. The agenda talked about succession, modern leadership expectations, and transition stories. There was a line saying the board would review current roles and propose next steps. The sender was our board secretary, but I knew she did not decide the agenda alone. This came from someone else. I did not need anyone to tell me who had pushed for this meeting. For a few seconds, my finger hovered over the decline button. Some part of me wanted to hit it and see what they would do if I simply stayed away. Then the other part of me, the part that had survived the early years and the long nights, told me that walking away in anger would only help people who wanted me out. I closed the invite and put the tablet down. My hands rested flat on the desk. In that moment, the noise in my head went quiet. I did not feel a burst of rage. I felt a clear, sharp line inside me. I knew that I could not go on like this, hoping they would remember who built this place. I also knew that if I shouted, if I tried to fight them with loud words, I would only look like the problem they wanted to show. So I did something simple. I opened my calendar and added the board meeting to my own schedule. Then I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. When I finally stood up, I had made a calm decision. I would stop waiting for respect to appear on its own. I would look for the truth, even if it hurt. That afternoon, I went downstairs to the warehouse for a walk. Moving among the pallets and forklifts has always helped me think. The air is different there. It smells like work, like wood and fuel and metal. At the far end of the floor is a door that leads to the stairs, down into the basement and the service area. Most people never go down there unless something breaks. I know the building well because I bought it and managed the repairs myself for years. The basement has low ceilings, concrete floors, and long rows of pipes. In one corner sits a small room with a mop sink, shelves of cleaning supplies, and a simple metal chair. That is the janitor's space. That is Jorge's world. I pushed the door open and called out his name. He answered from the back and came around the corner with a bundle of rags in his hands. His face always looks a little tired, but his eyes are sharp. I have known him longer than I have known most of the managers upstairs. When the company was still small, he was the one who stayed late to fix leaks and unclog drains so we did not have to close. I told him I had a question and asked if he had a moment. He nodded and said that he always had time for me. I told him that someone had mentioned late meetings in my office when I was not there. I asked if he had seen anything like that. He looked at the door, then back at me. His answer was careful. He said that he worked nights often and that he did his rounds on all the floors. He said that in the last few weeks, he had noticed light in my office at hours when I was usually gone. He said he had seen Logan and Irene go in, sometimes with another man in a suit. He added that they always closed the blinds and stayed for a long time. I asked him if he knew what they were doing. He shook his head. He said he did not listen at doors. He only knew that they never held those meetings anywhere else, and that they always happened when the building was quiet. He told me he had thought about telling me earlier, but did not want to cause trouble if it was something harmless. Then he said that after seeing me in the hallway the other day, he felt that I should know. Something in my chest tightened as he spoke. I thanked him for being honest. I told him I was glad that he trusted me enough to share this. As I turned to go back upstairs, he hesitated and then said that he could be wrong about what it all meant, but that if I wanted to know the truth, I should not just ask people. He said that actions tell more than words. His words stayed with me the rest of the day. When I got home that evening, I did not turn on the television. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. I wrote down dates and times that I could remember strange things happening. Emails sent late at night, unexpected changes to documents, remarks in meetings. On another page, I wrote a simple question. What are they doing in my office when I am not there? The next morning, on my way to work, I stopped at an electronics store. I walked past the rows of large screens and shiny speakers and went to a shelf with small devices. I picked up a simple camera, the kind that can connect to a home network and send live video to a phone or laptop. The box showed a picture of it sitting on a bookshelf, almost hidden between other items. At the checkout, the young clerk asked if I needed help setting it up. I told him I would manage. He said that the app was easy to use and that many people bought these cameras now to watch their pets or front doors. I paid, put the box in my bag, and drove to the office with my heartbeat a little faster than usual. When I entered my office, I locked the door behind me. I opened the box, took out the camera, and turned it over in my hands. It was small, dark, and almost looked like a simple piece of decoration. I chose a spot high on a shelf where I kept a plant and some old books. From that angle, it could see most of the room, including my desk and the front of my safe. I plugged it in, followed the steps on my phone, and watched as a small image of my office appeared on the screen. I took a slow breath. I moved around the room and checked the picture to see if anything was hidden or if the camera stood out. It blended in well. Unless someone looked very closely, they would not see it. I sat at my desk and opened my email. My fingers shook only a little as I typed. I wrote a simple message to the whole company. I said that I had been feeling worn out and that after talking with my doctor, I had decided to take a short break. I said I would be on vacation for a week starting the following Monday, but that I would remain available for urgent issues. I thanked the team for their hard work. Within a few minutes, replies started to come in. People sent polite notes hoping I would recharge. Irene wrote that they would keep everything running smoothly and that I should not worry. Logan answered very fast. He told me it was a great idea to step back for a bit and that he and Irene would cover all leadership tasks. He added a smiley face at the end. I stared at that small symbol for a while. That afternoon, I spoke briefly with the board secretary in the hallway. I told her I would be back in time for the board discussion and that I would be ready to talk about the future. She seemed relieved and said that would be good because some people were waiting to hear from me about succession. I nodded and kept my face calm. Inside, something steadied even more. If they wanted to talk about the future, I would let reality speak for me. On the last working day before my vacation, I stayed later than usual. I closed the door to my office, straightened the papers on my desk, and took the usual things I needed. Before I left, I checked the camera feed on my phone again. The image was clear. I turned off the main light, leaving only the soft glow from the street lamps outside. The room looked empty and still. Instead of booking a flight or packing a suitcase, I reserved a room at a small business motel on the other side of town. It was the kind of place traveling salespeople use. Plain, clean, with a bed, a desk, and a weak coffee machine in the corner. I chose it because it was anonymous. No one from the company ever went there. No one would look for me there. On Monday morning, I checked in with a small bag and my laptop. The clerk did not even look up for long. The room smelled faintly of cleaning product and old carpet. The window looked out onto a parking lot with a few cars and a thin strip of grass. I unpacked my things, opened my laptop, and connected to the motel's weak internet. Then I opened the app for the camera. The picture came up, my office, empty, just as I had left it. The chair was pushed in, the desk clear, the plant still. Seeing it from this distance on a screen felt strange. It was like looking at someone else's life. During the day, I watched from time to time. Most of the time, nothing happened. Lights from the hallway spilled in when someone passed by. Once, I saw a cleaning cart roll past the door. The camera did not have sound until someone came close, so I watched in silence. I answered a few emails to keep up the image that I was simply away but still reachable. In the afternoon, there was a knock at my motel door. My chest tightened for a second until I heard a familiar voice call my name. I opened the door and saw Jorge standing in the hallway, holding his cap in his hands. He looked a bit out of place in that bright corridor, but his eyes were steady. I asked how he had found me. He said that when I had asked him about the night meetings, he felt I was not just making small talk. He had noticed that I looked tired and serious. He guessed I would not go far if I wanted to watch something. He said there were only a few motels near the office that fit someone like me, and he tried this one first. I let him in and thanked him for coming. He stood by the desk and looked at the laptop screen. He could see my empty office. He stayed quiet for a moment, then told me that there would be another meeting that evening. He said he had heard them talking about it in the hallway the night before, using my office as a place to meet again. I asked him what time. He said they had mentioned 7 in the evening. Then he looked me straight in the eyes and told me that if I wanted to understand everything, I should watch the camera feed at that time and not look away. His voice was calm, but there was a kind of warning in it. After he left, the hours moved slowly. I tried to read, but the words on the page would not stay in my head. I paced the room, sat down, stood up, checked the camera again, checked the time. The digital clock on the bedside table seemed to drag. Outside, the sky dimmed from blue to gray to a deeper shade. At 6:45, I sat at the small desk with my laptop open and my hands folded. The image of my office was still, lit now by the ceiling lights, which had been turned on by someone in the afternoon. At 6:55, my heart began to beat hard enough that I could hear it in my ears. The clock on the screen in the corner of my office view read 6:55 p.m. At 7:01 p.m., the door to my office opened on the video feed. Logan walked in first, followed by Irene, and behind them came a man in a dark suit I had never seen before. Logan closed the door carefully and reached up to pull the blinds shut, one by one, until the room was closed off from the outside. On the screen, Logan walked around my office like it already belonged to him. He put his tablet down on my desk, right on the spot where I usually rest my hands. Irene closed the door and checked the handle. The man in the dark suit looked around slowly, taking in the shelves, the safe, the window, the photos. They talked, and after a moment the small camera picked up their voices. Logan said that this was the last quiet session before they took everything to the board. He sounded excited, full of energy. He told the suited man that the board vote would be simple if they showed a clear plan. Irene said they already had most of the board on their side, and that people were tired of what she called old-style leadership. The suited man asked about me in a casual tone. He wanted to know how much control I still had in practice. Logan laughed a little and said that I still had the title, but that real decisions already passed through him and Irene. He said that I did not understand half of what they were doing now and that I was out of my depth with modern tools. Then he used a phrase that made my head ring. He said that once he was voted in as chief and the new investor group came on board, they could park me in a nice advisory role and let me fade out over time. He said that I would not cause trouble if they gave me a fancy title and a small platform to tell old stories. Irene agreed and added that they could keep me busy with legacy projects so I would feel useful. I felt my throat close. I sat very still in that motel chair, staring at my own son on the screen as he spoke about me like a piece of equipment he was planning to store away. The suited man asked about the building and the company accounts. He wanted to know who signed the leases and who had rights to move money. Irene said that most people did not look at those details and that once Logan was official chief, they could adjust things. She said that the building was a detail they could take care of after the board saw Logan as the new face. I watched as Logan walked over to my safe. I saw him type a code into the keypad with quick hands. The door opened. My eyes burned. I had never given him that code. I had changed it not long ago and had not written it down. On the screen, he took out folders from the safe and set them in a pile on my desk. Some of those folders held old agreements, notes about the first time I set up shares in the company, documents I had not touched in years. He flipped through them like they were junk mail. They did not find what they wanted there, so he put them back quickly and closed the safe. The suited man seemed more interested in the newer documents spread across my desk. Irene showed him a printed draft of a transition plan. I could not read the text from the camera angle, but I heard her say that this plan placed Logan as chief within a month and described me as honorary founder and advisor with limited duties. The suited man nodded slowly and said that his group liked clean changes. He said that investors wanted to see strong young leadership and no mixed signals. He asked if there was any chance I would resist in public. Logan shook his head and said that I did not like conflict and that I would go along if things were presented as a done deal. He said that I trusted him and did not understand how much work they had already done behind my back. At that moment, something inside me twisted so hard I thought I might pass out. I felt lightheaded. For a second, the picture on the laptop blurred. I heard my own breathing more than their voices. I gripped the edge of the desk in that motel room until my fingers hurt. On the screen, they kept talking. They discussed a timeline, board meeting, public statement, new roles. Irene suggested a celebration event with a speech about a new era. The suited man liked that idea. Logan said he would handle the staff and clients and that he would make sure everyone saw this as progress. They stood in my office, planning how to move me aside, using my own furniture and my own air. When they finally left, turning off the lights and closing the door, I sat in the motel room without moving. I do not know how long I stayed like that. At some point, I realized my hands were shaking. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms flat on the desk. The first wave was pure hurt. This was not just about a job. This was my son. This was a boy I had carried in my arms while signing delivery slips. This was someone I had protected for decades, now speaking about me as if I were a problem to be managed. Then another feeling came in, slower but stronger. It was not rage. It was a kind of clear, steady coldness. I told myself, out loud, in that empty room, that I had just been given the truth I had asked for. I could not pretend anymore. I could not tell myself that I was too sensitive or that this was only a phase. The truth was now on video. I opened the laptop again. My hands were still unsteady, but my mind was not. I played back the recording from the app. Then I used software on my computer to record the screen with sound from start to finish. When it was done, I saved the file with a simple name and copied it to a small USB drive I had brought with me. Then I copied it again to a private cloud folder I used for personal records. I looked at the 3 copies and felt my breath slow. This was no longer just pain. This was evidence. That night, I slept in short pieces. Every time I woke up, I saw a piece of that meeting in my mind. Logan opening my safe, Irene talking about adjusting things, the suited man asking if I would resist. I kept hearing Logan's words about parking me in an advisory role until I faded out. In the morning, I showered, put on a clean shirt, and took a slow walk around the motel parking lot to clear my head. Then I drove to Naomi Chen's law office. Naomi's office is on the 10th floor of a simple building downtown. I have known her for more than 15 years. She helped me set up early contracts, advised me when I signed the first big lease for our warehouse, and later helped me create a trust for the company shares. She has a calm way of speaking that used to make me feel safe. That morning, I needed that calm more than ever. When I walked in, her assistant looked surprised to see me without an appointment. I said I could wait, but Naomi came out of her office as soon as she heard my name. She saw my face and told me to come in right away. We sat across from each other at a round table. I set my laptop down and told her I needed to show her something. I played the recording from the night before. I watched it again, this time with her in the room. I paid more attention to her face than to the screen. She did not interrupt. She did not say anything while the three of them moved around my office. Her expression stayed mostly neutral, but I saw her eyes narrow slightly when they talked about using my position, my safe, my documents. When the video ended, the room was quiet. I told her, in simple words, that this was not about office gossip. This was my son, my chief of operations, planning to push me aside and change control of the company and possibly the building. I told her I felt hurt as a father, but that in her office, I needed to speak as an owner. I wanted to know what rights I still had and what tools were already in place that I had forgotten. Naomi folded her hands and asked a few clear questions. Who owned the building on paper? How were the company shares arranged? Who had signing rights on the accounts? We had set these things up together years ago, but time and routine had blurred the details in my mind. Now she pulled out her files, opened a drawer, and took out a thick folder with my name on it. She reminded me, step by step, of what we had done long ago when the company grew. I had placed the building in my own name, then leased it to the company. I had put a majority of the company shares into a family trust, where I was still the main trustee. Some shares were assigned to Logan as part of a long-term plan, but control stayed with the trust and the trustee. Listening to her, I felt like someone was walking me back through a house I had built, but then stopped really seeing. The walls were still there. I had just forgotten where some of the doors were. Naomi said that if what we just watched was part of a plan to misuse company property or break their duty to the company and its owners, then there were steps we could take. She did not go into full detail yet. She said we should start by documenting everything quietly. Copies of the video, dates, emails, messages, notes about meetings. I told her I had already saved several copies of the recording. She nodded and suggested that I send one to her secure office account so that it sat in her records as well. I did that while I sat there. The file moved across the screen, a simple progress bar, but it felt like something heavy sliding into place. After that, she suggested we review my old agreements and trust documents together soon. She said she wanted to make sure that everything was still filed correctly at the bank and with the authorities. We agreed to meet again in a day or two. She told me to stay calm in front of everyone at the company, to keep acting as if nothing had changed, and to let her handle the quiet side. When I left her office, the sun outside felt too bright. I put on my sunglasses and walked 1 block to a small park. I sat on a bench for a while, listening to the sounds of traffic and children playing on a nearby playground. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Arthur Blake. Arthur runs Blake Hardware Group, one of our oldest clients. He is only a few years younger than me. We have worked together since the early days when both our companies were small. He had heard from Logan recently about future plans, and I had promised to catch up with him soon. I called him back and asked if he had time for a walk. He said he was nearby and could meet me at the park. 10 minutes later, he arrived in a simple jacket, no tie, coffee in hand. We walked along the path under the trees. I did not tell him everything. I did not mention the camera or the full plan. I only said that there might be changes at Cole Logistics soon, that my son was pushing for a shift in leadership, and that some people thought I should step back. Arthur listened quietly. Then he asked me one direct question. Was I still the one who made sure his deliveries arrived when he needed them? I said yes. He asked if I still cared about his business the way I always had. I said yes again. He nodded and told me that he did business with people, not titles. He said that if anything official changed, he wanted to hear it from me and not from a polished announcement. His words settled in me like a weight, but a good one this time. They reminded me that not everyone cared about shiny slides or new faces. Some people still valued long work and trust. Later that afternoon, back at the motel, I opened my email again. There was a new message from the board secretary. The subject line read, Leadership Transition Celebration and Board Vote, Invitation. I clicked it. The message said that in 1 week, the board would meet in the main boardroom to hold a formal vote on new leadership structure. It also mentioned a short celebration event after the vote, with key clients invited to hear about a new era for Cole Logistics. My presence was marked as required. The word celebration in that email stayed with me long after I closed the message. Celebration of what, exactly? a quiet removal dressed up as progress. I sat on the edge of the motel bed with my laptop on my knees and stared at the closed screen, feeling the two sides of my life pulling in different directions. On one side, I was a father who had just watched his son plan to move him aside. On the other, I was the founder and owner who had to think clearly, like any leader would, when someone threatened the structure he had built. I told myself I could not let the first side break the second. That night, back at home, I made a small choice that helped me feel steady. I took my laptop to the kitchen table and opened the video file once more. I watched it from start to finish one last time, forcing myself not to look away this time when Logan opened my safe or when Irene talked about keeping me in some quiet corner. I wanted every word burned into my mind so no one could make me doubt what I had heard. When it ended, I did not replay it again. I organized it. I created a main folder on my drive with a simple name that meant something only to me. Inside that folder, I made 3 subfolders and labeled them by date. I saved 3 copies of the recording inside, each with a slightly different name and format. Then I put 1 copy on the small USB drive I had bought, testing it on a second device to make sure it played without any issue. After that, I opened my email and wrote a very short message to Naomi. I did not explain the whole story, I simply wrote, "For your records, attach the video file," and pressed send. A few seconds later, my screen showed that the message had left my outbox. The idea that the recording now also lived on her secure system gave me a strange sense of relief. Even if someone broke into my office or my home computer, they could not erase this completely. Then I turned to my email history. I searched for words like transition, succession, advisor, and step back. Many messages appeared, some from Irene, some from Logan, some from board members. I did not read them all in detail. I scanned them and dragged important ones into a new folder called Leadership Talk. In another folder, I placed my own notes about meetings that had felt wrong with simple titles: client call, not informed, strategy meeting, no invite, and so on. It was not about building a case to shout at them. It was about building a clear picture for myself, so when the time came, I would not rely on a tired memory or emotions. I wanted dates and words in black and white. For the next few days, I kept my vacation going on the surface. I answered a few harmless emails, thanked people for their well wishes, and sent short replies that made it sound like I was resting and reading. In truth, my days were split between visits with Naomi and visits to institutions that held pieces of my company's structure. The second time I went to Naomi's office that week, the sky was gray and low. I sat in her waiting area for only a moment before she called me in. She had already printed some things from her files and set them on the table, but she kept the pages turned so that only she could see the details. We talked about general things first. She asked how I was feeling. I said I was tired, but clear. She nodded and said that clear was better than angry in times like this. Then we moved to the real reason for my visit. She talked about responsibilities that people in Logan's position had toward the company and toward the owners. She explained in simple language that people in leadership must act in the best interest of the organization, not just their own image or outside deals. She spoke about how using company space and resources to plan something against the owner or making promises to outsiders without proper authority could be a serious breach. She never raised her voice. She did not tell me what to feel. She only laid out the general lines of what should and should not happen. Then she reminded me of something else, that as trustee of the family structure we had set up years ago, I was not just a person with a title. I was someone with duties myself. Duties to the company, to future staff, to clients, and even to my son, strange as that felt in that moment. I asked her if it was too late to do anything. She answered that it was not. She said that long ago, when we had created that structure, we had built in ways to respond if someone tried to take control in a way that hurt the company or broke trust. She did not show me those lines word for word, or she just tapped a stack of papers and said that we had done careful work back then, and that careful work still had power. She told me there were some papers she wanted me to sign to confirm or adjust certain things. She described them only in broad strokes. An update to clarify leadership rights in case of serious misconduct, a confirmation of my role as trustee, a note about what would happen if a beneficiary took steps to remove the person who built the assets without following the proper path. I listened closely, then took the pen she slid across the table and signed where she pointed. I did not need to see every line. I trusted her, and more importantly, I trusted the version of myself who had come to her years ago, when things were calm, asking to build something solid and fair. From Naomi's office, I went to the bank on another day. There, in a small room with a glass door, I met with a manager who had seen me through several loan renewals and credit adjustments over the years. We spoke about basic things, confirming which signatures were valid on certain accounts, updating some contact details, making sure my current instructions were clearly written into their system. I kept my explanation simple. I said I wanted everything to be clean and consistent before an upcoming leadership talk. The manager nodded and said that was wise. I signed forms without rushing. Each line was another part of me quietly taking back control of things I had allowed to drift. In the evenings, when I was back home, the house felt strange. It was the same kitchen, the same furniture, the same framed photos on the walls, but my mind was somewhere between my past and the next week. I would heat up a simple meal, sit at the table, and sometimes catch myself staring at the chair where Logan used to sit when he was a boy, swinging his legs and asking me questions about trucks. One night, I called him. The call went to voicemail. I left a short message saying that I hoped his week at the office was going well and that I would see him at the board meeting. My voice sounded calm, almost too calm to my own ears. He did not call back. Later that same night, I picked up my phone again and called Jorge. He answered on the second ring. I heard the soft echo of the building in the background, the hollow sound of his cartwheels on the floor. I asked if he had a moment. He said he always had time for me. I told him that I had seen enough now to understand what was going on. I thanked him for reaching out to me and said that his quiet warning had changed everything. Then I asked him a simple question. If someone from inside or outside the company ever asked him what he had seen, could he tell the truth? He was quiet for a breath. Then he said that he did not like taking sides in other people's disputes, but that he also did not like watching unfair things happen. He said that he would tell the truth if it came to that, but he would not lie for anyone. I told him that was all I hoped for. I promised that I would never ask him to say anything that was not true. We ended the call on that note. I looked at my phone for a long time after, feeling grateful and sad at the same time. The people who stood by me in this moment were not the ones anyone would have predicted. My lawyer, my oldest client, my janitor. Not my own son. The week moved faster after that. The date of the board meeting sat on my calendar like a red mark. Each morning, I woke up with that day in mind, and each night, I checked again that my small pieces were all in place. The recording safe in several places, the signed papers with Naomi, the account notes at the bank, the quiet understanding with Arthur, the spoken promise from Jorge. On the evening before the meeting, I opened my closet and chose my clothes for the next day with more care than usual. I did not pick my most expensive suit. Instead, I chose a simple dark jacket, a clean white shirt, and a tie that I had worn to our company's 10th anniversary. I wanted to look like myself, not like someone pretending to be someone else. I took the small USB drive from its spot on my desk and placed it inside a plain envelope, along with one printed sheet that Naomi had given me with a few short points on it. She had told me it would help the board understand the basic obligations if things went in a certain direction. The envelope felt light, but it might as well have been made of stone from how solid it seemed in my hand. That night, I slept better than I expected. My body still woke a few times, but each time I reminded myself that I had done what I could. The rest would come down to speaking clearly in one room, in front of people who had known me for years. In the morning, the sky was clear and cold. I shaved carefully, put on the clothes I had set aside, and ate a small breakfast, even though I was not hungry. Before I left the house, I stood for a moment in front of a photo on the hallway wall. A picture from the early days, me and Logan standing in front of our first two trucks, both of us smiling. I touched the frame lightly and then turned away. When I arrived at the office building, the parking lot was already more crowded than usual. I saw a couple of unfamiliar cars that likely belonged to board members or guests. The lobby looked different too. Someone had hung a banner on the far wall that said, "New Era of Leadership, Cole Logistics." The words were printed in bold, modern letters. Underneath, a small screen played a loop of images, trucks moving, warehouse shots, and then a slide with Logan's picture next to the words, "Vision for the Future." My own face did not appear anywhere in that loop. Staff walked through the lobby in nicer clothes than normal. Some carried folders, others tablets. There was a nervous energy in the air, the way there is before a big announcement. A few people greeted me more stiffly than before, as if they did not know exactly where I stood in all this. I did not stop to chat. I nodded to the receptionist, who looked at me with wide eyes and walked toward the elevators. The floor felt firm under my shoes, but there was a slight tremble in my legs. In my left hand, I held the plain envelope with the USB drive and the paper. My thumb rested on the sealed flap, pressing gently, as if to check that it was still there. The elevator doors opened with a soft sound. I stepped inside alone. As the doors closed, I saw my reflection in the mirrored panel. Older, yes, with lines on my face and gray in my hair, but standing straight. I watched myself as the floor numbers climbed. With each level, I felt something in me settle even more. I was not going up there to beg for my place. I was going to tell the truth and let the systems I had built do their work. When the doors slid open on the floor with the boardroom, I stepped out into a quieter hallway. At the end of it, through the glass walls, I could see people already taking their seats around the long table. I recognized the board chair, Irene's neat profile, the back of Logan's head as he checked something on a laptop. On one side of the room, Arthur stood talking to another board member, his face serious. I took a breath, adjusted my jacket, and walked down the hallway toward the open doors, the envelope steady in my hand. The boardroom was bright and full when I walked in. Conversation stopped for a moment, then started again in a softer tone. The board chair greeted me with a practiced smile and thanked me for coming. Logan stood at the far end of the table, near the large screen, in a new suit. Irene sat beside him with a neat stack of papers. I took my usual seat halfway down the table. Arthur caught my eye and gave me a small nod. Naomi sat near the back wall, legal pad in front of her, calm as always. The board chair opened the meeting with a short speech about change and growth. He spoke kindly about my years of building and then said that today was about the future of leadership. He gestured toward Logan and invited him to present his plan. Logan walked to the screen and clicked his remote. The first slide showed our logo and the words Cole Logistics 2.0. He began talking about markets, digital change, faster decisions. After a minute, I raised my hand. I asked if I could show a short video from my office before any vote. I said it would help the board understand the full picture. There was a small pause. Then the chair agreed. I stood, took the envelope from my jacket, and handed the USB drive to the staff member at the projector. The lights dimmed slightly. On the screen, my office appeared. Then the board watched Logan and Irene walk in at 7 in the evening with the man in the dark suit. No one spoke while they watched Logan open my safe, heard him talk about parking me in a quiet role, heard Irene promise control to an outsider after a vote. The room grew very still. When the video ended, I did not raise my voice. I simply said that the building in that video belonged to me, that the office was mine, and that the recording was already with company legal counsel. I said that I had concerns not as a father, but as majority owner and trustee. Naomi spoke next. She explained in clear terms that what they had just seen showed a serious break in duty to the company and its owners. She slid printed summaries of our agreements to the board members and said that steps had already been prepared if such behavior occurred. Then I told them, quietly, that as trustee I had filed documents to suspend Logan and Irene from their roles for cause and to start formal review. As building owner, I had also given notice that any company led by them would lose its space. I added that key clients, including Arthur, had already confirmed they would remain with a structure led by me and a new team. Arthur stood and said he trusted the person who had always kept his goods moving, not someone who used secret meetings in another man's office. Philip, the board member who liked fresh energy, looked down at the papers in front of him and then said he supported my actions. The chair called for a vote on immediate removal of Logan and Irene from their positions. Hands went up around the table, one after another. Logan tried to object, but Naomi reminded him that under our rules, he could not vote on his own case. When it was done, the chair looked at security. 2 staff members stepped in and asked Logan and Irene to hand over their badges and laptops. They did, faces pale, saying very little. Logan glanced at me, waiting for something. I did not speak. I placed my office keys on the table in front of the board chair and said I would help design a new leadership plan that protected the company and its people, but that I would no longer pretend everything was fine. Then I turned and walked out. In the lobby, the New Era banner still hung on the wall. Workers hurried past, whispering. Arthur came to stand at my side. A moment later, Jorge stepped out of a service hallway, cap in hand, eyes full of quiet understanding. Behind us, the boardroom door closed with a soft final sound.